and answer any other questions that you may have. At this point, I'd like to welcome ATA President Jason Schilling and hand it over to him.
Well, thank you, Heather, and good morning, everyone who's joined us here in person and those who are joining us online. My main role as president is to represent the views of 51,000 teachers in this province. Throughout the bargaining process, the ATA's bargaining team has listened to and taken direction of teachers in this province. Our conversations at the negotiation table reflect what they told us, and their message has been loud and clear about what they need to teach in Alberta. The ATA Central Table Bargaining Committee, CTBC, met with the Teachers Employment Bargaining Committee, TEBA, for 2 days this week. A settlement was not achieved, and the parties have reached an impasse. The provincial government did not provide TEBA the mandate required for movement on proposed salary. Instead, they offered the same wage increase that was in the original mediator's recommended terms of settlement that was already turned down by teachers in the spring. Teachers cannot accept a salary offer that does not attract and retain Alberta teachers by catching up and keeping up with inflation. Teachers have only received a 5.75% increase in the last decade. A fair wage is not just about money. It's about showing respect for the value teachers bring to the Alberta's education system. The very value the government, including the Premier herself last weekend, acknowledged. Teachers shape Alberta's future. Teachers who have given their all to their students, their schools, and their communities, but yet they see their compensation fall behind every year. As students begin attending classes across the province, they will once again be returning to a public education system that spends the least per student in Canada. 3,000 additional teachers is a drop in the bucket and should have already been planned for by government to address population growth. This proposal was a last-ditch effort by the ATA to somehow add teachers to an already strained education system. And I'd like to take a moment to shine the light on several new, complex, sensitive tasks that require time, training, and emotional labor that teachers will see added to their plates this fall. Teachers are now responsible for sorting and calling not only library books, but also the books that they have accumulated in their own classrooms, often paid for with their own money. Managing opt-in permission forms for sensitive content is new, and navigating new protocols around gender identity has caused anxiety amongst the membership. These new tasks are now piled upon already implementing new curriculum and standardized testing for every student in kindergarten and grade 3. The workload has increased, the expectations have grown, class sizes continue to soar, and the pay has barely moved. The association initially attempted to deliver for students with a variety of solutions to address class size and classroom complexities, including a teacher-pupil ratio. All of these attempts were turned down by the government's bargaining team. Securing 1,000 new teachers annually for 3 years was an alternative attempt to address class size, even though that we know that this number is not enough. The ATA attempted to deliver for students what they need in their classrooms. Now it's time for the Alberta government to deliver for teachers. When half of new teachers in our profession leave within the first 5 years of their career, the message is clear. The education system in Alberta is unsustainable. It is a move that is typical from government. They have turned around and blamed the very people who have been sounding the alarm about the state of public education in Alberta. It is hypocritical for the government to claim that they value education while running a public education system that spends the least per student in all of Canada and simultaneously underpaying the very people who make it work. The government cannot profess to value public education, then turn around and vilify teachers and the professional association. This government cannot address only part of the problem and expect it to be solved. They need to deal with the entire problem and do the right thing. Pay teachers for the increasing amount of work that they do with children who are the future of this province. Teachers are the pillar of our public education system. It's time for government to step up with a fair deal for teachers, because a fair deal for teachers is a good deal for kids. And I'm ready now to take questions. Am I just going to start and work my way around?
Whoever has their hand up.
Okay, we'll do that. We'll go right here, please. Thanks.
Stephen Sandor from the Edmonton Journal. Saying that, are you willing to activate the 72-hour strike clock? Are kids going to be in school next week?
Our Provincial Executive Council, who is the governing body of the Alberta Teachers Association, will make that strategic decision about if or when we need to invoke the very strong strike mandate that was given to us by teachers in the spring. Ideally, we'd like to see a negotiated settlement that doesn't involve any kind of job action, but we have to see what ongoing negotiations or talks will come about.
Okay, so next week kids will be at school.
Yep, they will.
Okay, and the second question is, this morning Minister Nicolaides accused you of playing politics with this, that this was what you asked for in May. What would your response be to that?
Several attempts were given in our initial proposal to government to address class size and composition issues that we're seeing here in Alberta. Government is so fiscally tight in terms of the mandate that they've given TIBA that they turned all of those down. The 3,000 teachers added over the next 3 years is a drop in the bucket of what we needed to see. We're not politicizing everything or anything. We are showing the reality of what is happening within our schools in Alberta. The fact that my colleagues are seeing the largest classes that they've ever seen. The fact that they can't spend more than maybe up to 2 minutes per student in a classroom. The fact that they don't have the resources to meet the needs of students within our schools, including those with special needs. The fact that they don't have the very things that they need to do their jobs, all while watching their salaries fall further and further behind, is not politicizing. It's telling the truth about what we see in our schools.
Renali Yamshin, CBC Edmonton. In the event that a strike is issued, can you just walk us through what that process is so families kind of know how that would play out?
Well, definitely. If we choose to use our strike mandate, we would have to give 72 hours notice, and then parents would be able to know what is happening with that. Then, of course, strike job action would happen. Schools, when I was on strike in 2002, schools were closed, and that was the reality of how things were dealt with back then. I'm not sure how school boards will manage moving forward with this job action if it should happen, and then we will continue to go on from there. I will note throughout the entire bargaining process, whether job action is put in place or not, bargaining can happen and negotiations can happen at any time to achieve a settlement.
And what would the union do if a back-to-work order was ever issued?
Well, our Provincial Executive Council, again, the governing body of the association, would look to see what that order had to say, and then we would review our options, whether legal or illegal.
So was the offer 12% over 4?
The monetary offer was 12% over 4 with a change in grid around year 3. Teachers were given this same monetary offer in the spring and they turned it down.
So what's the ask? What would do teachers, what would they like to see? What would the ATA like to see as something acceptable?
What teachers would like to see, and they have told us this time and time again, and this is what our collective bargaining team is talking about when they go to the table. They want to make up for lost inflation and keep pace with current inflation. And so they looked at what the offer was and made some suggestions to alter it to make it that so it would be better, but that was turned down by government.
So what was the ask then?
The ask was to move the change of the grid up earlier and to make some adjustments so that those who are at the top of the grid would receive a 1.5% increase on that as well.
The grid restructure plus 3%? Or is there a percentage so people that don't go, they'd like to see X amount of percentage over a certain amount of time? Like, have you been able to figure that out? What would that look like?
Well, I mean, what we've seen in all the public sector unions is that there's been an amalgamation of 12% with some sort of grid adjustments. And so the ATA is not an outlier in that in terms of looking at it. It would be 12% with a grid adjustment with an increase for those that were top of the grid. Where you are in terms of experience and education coming into it, like bachelor's degree or whatever, would determine where you fall on that grid, and each individual teacher would have to work that out. In the spring, we created a calculator so that teachers would be able to clearly identify where they would fall in terms of that.
Jason, Minister Nicolaides said that the union's preference is to have fewer new teachers hired with higher wages. Is that accurate? Is that what?
That was never tabled by the association.
And can you walk me through what the next steps are? Because we walked away from mediation yesterday. So is there anything scheduled to get back to the table at this point in time? Or are we just in limbo?
Well, we had meetings this week with the help of a mediator. So both sides were meeting with the help of a mediator. We have no talks scheduled right now at the moment, but we could schedule talks at any given time.
The minister said that you're welcome back to the bargaining table and he feels the deal is close. Do you feel the deal is close?
Well, we have been very clear about what our expectations are based on what Alberta teachers have told us. They're aware of that, and so we're willing to have ongoing negotiations with that in mind.
All right, we're going to take some questions from online now. If you can hear me, Timur Durrani from the Globe and Mail, you can go ahead and unmute yourself to ask your question.
I don't know if you said, but my name is Globe and Mail, but it's quite weak on the sound there, so I think you are talking about me or Durrani from Globe and Mail. Is that what you expected to not?
Yes.
Yeah, can we turn the volume up somehow?
Okay, so thank you so much for taking our questions.
Sorry, give us just a second here. He muted himself. Can you ask him to unmute?
Can you unmute yourself and ask your question again? Sorry, we're just having a little bit of sound difficulties on this end.
Okay, can you hear me better now?
Yep, that's better. Thank you.
Sorry about that. Thank you so much for taking our questions this morning. You've mentioned that this looming strike is arriving at the same time as Alberta's goalpost of October for the removal of books in school libraries and mandates to implement new rules around pronouns and trans students. I wonder, how have those social issues come up during contract negotiations so far, and how much do you plan to include them in the future?
Well, they're not part of the ongoing negotiations right now because we started a year ago and these have been introduced since then. And so you wouldn't introduce new topics while you're within the bargaining process unless both parties agree to do so. But what this has happened, what this has done to my members and what we're hearing from them, the book banning, the ministerial order on school libraries, Bill 27, the anti-trans legislation, the pronoun, the opting in for sex ed, getting materials approved by third-party materials approved by government, has added to the workload of teachers, and it has angered them in terms of the fact that it seems like we are marginalizing a certain group of our students, that we are targeting 2S LGBTQ plus students within our schools. We're saying you're not allowed to see yourselves reflected within the school library or the classroom library. We're also seeing that teachers are looking at the classroom libraries that they have. And I'm hearing reports from teachers that instead of having to deal with the consequences of a book ban or a school library ban, they're just boxing all their books up. That they're going to close libraries until mid-October, until school boards can get their policies in place. And I wonder as a teacher, as an English teacher, how this is good for students, how this is good for their learning, and how are they going to be able to see themselves reflected in the curriculum and the literature that they read. Like I said, I've taught high school English my entire career, have a classroom library, probably about 500 books within my classroom, most of it paid for with my own money. When do I have the time at the start of a school year with everything else that's been added to my plate to now suddenly turn around and inventory all of these books? And then we've all seen the circulated list of books that were banned there, and Minister Nicolaides had indicated that 1984 and The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood would not be considered a book that would be on this list, yet we saw it on the list yesterday.
Just as a follow-up, in your contract negotiations then, are you asking for more resources from the province to implement its mandates on book bans? Because as you said, right now that is adding to the workload. So are you asking for more, say, personnel from the province as well? Is that part of the negotiations right now?
It's not part of the negotiations, but I don't understand why teachers should have to ask for resources for things that the government wants them to do. If the government is going to put a mandate in place, if the government is going to put something on the plate for teachers to do, then the government should be supplying the resources, including money, for teachers to do that work. It shouldn't be on teachers to always be evoking government mandates without the resources available to them.
Thank you for your question. Caden Brayshaw with Livewire Calgary, go ahead and unmute yourself, please.
You guys hear me all right?
Yes, go ahead, please.
The government says you walked away from the table after getting kind of what you guys had asked for there in June, including 3,000 teachers and a 12% raise. Why wasn't that acceptable, and what specifically was and is missing from a potential deal?
When you look at the mediator's recommendation that came out in the spring that teachers had turned down, there was other provisions in there to address class size and complexities that teachers did not find acceptable. So the association's bargaining team, as a last-ditch effort, put together this 3,000 teachers hiring over the course of 3 years, recognizing that it's only a drop in the bucket of what we need. When the proposal was accepted by government on that part, that was good. However, there are other elements within the mediator's recommended settlements that was not addressed by government when they came back to the table this last week. And those things need to be addressed by government as well. You can't just fix half the problem. You need to fix the entire problem. And so our team, knowing that teachers had already turned down the majority of what was presented to them before, decided that this was the end of our conversation for the week.
Thank you. And as my follow-up, the government has described your public campaigning as manipulative. Do you believe your messaging has been transparent and factual?
It has been transparent and factual. We get the information about the spending the money that school boards have to spend on students from Stats Canada. It is public record because it is part of the education budget that the government tables every year in February. We all can see those numbers. And when you go and talk to people who work in schools, you can see the impact of the fact that we're the least funded school jurisdiction in all of Canada. You can see the classes that are approaching 40. 45. You can see the lack of resources. You can see students who are not getting their needs met. And as you work as a teacher and you represent teachers across the province, you can see the burnout and the frustration on the faces of my colleagues, and they are leaving the profession. In order to retain and attract teachers in the profession, we need to address their issues in the classroom, but we also need to address their salary asks. They've only seen a 5.75% increase in the last decade. We all know the price of groceries, rent, utilities, insurance have all gone up more than that number that teachers have seen. They're falling further and further behind, and they're leaving the profession because it's too much. It's enough, and they've had enough.
Thank you for your question. Catherine Grigowski, All Alberta, please unmute yourself and go ahead.
Yes, please, go ahead.
So this morning the minister said that the ATA's bargaining unit had actually asked for fewer teachers in order to get those raises, and I'm wondering what you would say to that statement.
That wasn't tabled in terms of the bargaining negotiations.
And the minister had also basically accused the ATA of saying one thing in public, that the concern was about classroom complexity, and then going to the bargaining table and saying, no, actually it was about raises. And the minister said he was very disappointed that the ATA's focus isn't on classrooms. So what would you say to that criticism that he's saying that it's only about wages for the ATA?
In terms of looking at what we would put forward in an initial proposal, it's very complex. It talks about classroom conditions, working conditions, salary, benefits, leaves. All of those things are on the table when you go to negotiations. So it's disingenuous to say that we only care about wages at this point, when we have been talking about classroom sizes, classroom complexity, benefits and leaves, and other things that we would talk about, including wages. All of those things are on the table for discussions. And you sign off on certain things when you're bargaining, but you keep talking about these things. I've been bargaining myself at the table for years, and traditionally salaries always seem to be the last thing that you talk about when you go through the bargaining process. So this shouldn't be a surprise to government, who have been bargaining with public sector unions for years, to have a conversation around salaries towards the end of any round of negotiation.
Thank you for your question. Lawrence from Radio Canada, you can go ahead and unmute yourself, please.
Go ahead, please. Is it Lawrence?
Lawrence from Radio.
The government, though,
Go ahead, please.
are mentioned, Laurence. Yep, so both of you are, yourself are saying you're willing to go back and negotiate, you want negotiation, you want discussion. So my question is, walked away last night from the table, and what would it take to get you back into negotiation?
Well, it would take government to have a reevaluation of their fiscal mandate. Right now, we're stuck in terms of the government has said you only have X amount of dollars to work with, and in order for us to move talks forward, we would have to have a serious discussion around that fiscal element that comes to what TIBA and the government are willing to discuss.
And it seems like there might be some sort of, well, the government said 12% increase is well within reason. It's what data shows, and you don't have the data to support more. So are you willing to negotiate? You mentioned there's other elements, and it's not just about salaries. So are you willing to go back to the negotiation table with those other elements?
We have had the conversation about market value with teachers, and the minister, when he made a comment about working Ontario West, we see what other teachers are making across the province, and they make more than Alberta teachers. They have seen increases within the last decade that outpace Alberta teachers. And so we can sit down and have a conversation about any of the data points government wants to sit down and have a conversation about. But we need to get to the table, and it needs to be a serious conversation with government willing to look and understand and stick to their words with actions about how they value and respect Alberta's teachers.
Thank you for your question. Michael King, Global News, go ahead and unmute yourself, please.
Hi there, thanks for taking the question. So you just mentioned that you would have to have a more holistic conversation in terms of government spending in order to even get back to the table. What does that mean for parents who are concerned that there could be job action in the coming weeks?
You know, I fully understand and acknowledge the uncertainty and the nervousness that parents would have around these contract negotiations and the timing with the start of school. We want to be in our buildings working with our kids. We want to be working with students with the resources that we need to meet those students' needs. I think parents should be challenging the government about why are they undervaluing public education and the people who work with them? Why are we, once again, the least funded in terms of spending for students in Canada? Why do we have students in our classrooms who don't get their needs met daily? Why are we in this spot right now? Why is the government chosen, and it's a choice, to fund education in this way? And I know that parents out there can see when their students go to school that these classrooms are overcrowded. They can see that parents, our teachers are frustrated and are starting to burn out. They can see this, and I realize that this potential of job action can cause that anxiety. However, Alberta teachers have taken the stance that they did and gave the strong strike mandate that they did in the spring because they care about the fact that the underfunding of education is harming students in this province, and they can't accept that. And that is why they've taken the stance that they have. Right now, Provincial Executive Council has not made the decision to invoke the 72-hour strike notice, and therefore that's where we are right now.
Thank you for your question. Bob Covey, Jasper Local. You can go ahead and unmute yourself, please.
Thanks, folks. Just a simple question. The minister said that you asked for 1,000 teachers for 3 years and that they offer that, but he said that your position has changed. Has it?
The position that was tabled in June had this within there. And so if they say our position has changed, when we had talks this week and he said nothing was countered, what was countered was our June 19th position.
Do you want to elaborate on what that means today?
What it means today is that what we put on the table on June 19th in terms of what teachers are seeking for is the position of the association as of this point within negotiations.
Thanks.
Jason Markisoff, CBC. Go ahead and unmute yourself, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Right. What do wage and salaries have to do, or how would that go to address classroom size and classroom complexity if teachers got more pay?
Well, it goes back to teacher retention and recruitment. So we know that within universities, we have about 2,000 teachers in pre-service programs. They graduate annually about 1,500 teachers. 25% of those teachers who graduate every year from a university program choose not to teach because of the classroom conditions. We also know that 50% of our teachers are leaving the profession within the first 5 years because classroom conditions are not what they thought it would be. And so improving the salaries of teachers helps in terms of retention and recruitment of people within the profession. You need new people coming into the profession, especially with the growth that we've been seeing. We have not seen teacher hiring keep pace with student growth over the last several years. There's a huge gap between the number of kids in our system and the number of teachers who are working with them. In fact, Alberta is the highest amount of students per teacher in all of Canada. Not only are we the least funded, we also have the most students within our classrooms per teacher. Including a wage increase would help move that so that teachers are staying here. Many of you have heard me talk about over the last several years a shortage of substitute teachers within the province. It would help to attract and retain substitute teachers so that when a teacher is sick or has a professional development day, which is a requirement, they actually have somebody who can come in and cover their class instead of the other teachers within the building scrambling to cover those absences. And finally, teachers have said to us, our wages have not kept pace with inflation. And they are looking to make sure that they can have a makeup of lost inflation and then just to keep pace with current inflation. They're not asking for the moon. They're asking to keep up with inflation within this province. Well, we can't really compare nurses with teachers because we're different professions. But we know that teachers have made a monetary ask at the table, and that is public. And they're looking to make sure that they can get a government that recognizes the value of their work and respects their work and pays them accordingly, especially since their workloads have keep increasing over the years.
Okay, we've got a few more questions online, then we will come back into the room here, ask any remaining questions, then we'll return back online for any lingering questions. George Lee, please go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, Jason. Thanks very much for taking our questions. I'm with the McLeod Gazette in Southern Alberta. My question is there some of these complexities that you're talking about that need to be addressed within the next contract? I'm wondering if you could characterize how those might be more or less important in some of the less urbanized areas of the province. Like, how big of a problem is this in small town Alberta?
Well, having come from Lethbridge and taught in rural schools my entire career, I can tell you the complexities that we see of our students are across this province, from the very top to the bottom and both sides. We have students coming to school who need literacy and numeracy support. We have students, some of our youngest ones, who qualify for our program unit funding, need that funding in order to make sure that they can achieve things in the early grades, but that funding cuts off at grade 1, and then they just become part of the general system. We have students that need reading support. We have students that need mental health support, but we don't have teacher counselors within our buildings anymore. We have students that have a variety of learning difficulties, some that are coded and funded and some that are not. And teachers across the province, whether they're in urban settings and rural settings, are dealing with these challenges within their classrooms.
I guess my follow-up would just be from the parents' perspective, is if there is in fact a strike, if that does happen, does the inconvenience or the difficulty in dealing with the logistics of the fall situation for parents, does that come into your thinking patterns when your membership looks at whether it's going to strike or not?
We definitely keep that in mind. I mean, you become a teacher because you want to work with students. You want to help them achieve the goals that they have in their life. You want to be able to help people. And teachers work very closely with parents for a lot of aspects around the relationship between students, teachers, and parents. They work very closely together. Teachers understand and recognize that this would cause an inconvenience and that it's creating anxiety for parents right now. But teachers also know that they are sticking up for their students in their classrooms because it's the right thing to do, because they're seeing too many kids slip through the cracks, and these are, the kids that parents are sending to school for us to work with. And I think that that's part of their thinking. They recognize the issue with that, and they keep that in mind as they're moving forward, but they know that they're fighting for them.
All right, Meredith Kerr, Lakeland This Week. Please go ahead and unmute yourself.
Go ahead, please, Meredith. Oh.
Yep. Can you hear me?
I can, sorry.
Okay. So the question that I had for you, one of the ongoing things in Alberta right now, I know the AUPE is also in negotiations with the government and also potentially looking at a strike this fall. Have there been any conversations between the ATA and the AUPE about coordinating a strike action?
Not in terms of coordinating strike action, but I am in regular contact with the other union presidents of public sector unions and private sector unions across Alberta.
Okay, and then as a follow-up to kind of build a bit more on what George had been asking about the more rural parts of the province. When you were discussing the potential for 3,000 new teachers to be added, was there a conversation about where in the province those teachers were going to be going, or like how they would be spread around?
In terms of negotiations, that sort of detail wouldn't be worked out at that moment. You would talk and say, yeah, this is what we're going to do. And then as you come to an agreement that is signed, then you would start working on the details with school boards and schools about where teachers would be hired in order to alleviate, especially some of the hot spots that we're seeing across the province.
Thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Thanks for your question. We're going to return to the room here now to take any other questions that you may have. Any questions here? All right.
We're good?
All right, we're going to go back online.
Okay.
Timur from the Globe and Mail, please go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you. I hope you can hear me. And thank you for returning again to the questions. I just had some clarifying questions before we end the call today. Mr. Schilling, I'm hoping you can lay this out more definitively before we end. Like, what exactly is the percentage for salary increase that you're hoping to walk away from here? I know you may not be able to say that, which is why I want you to say that. You might not want to say that. The province said it is offered 12% over 4 years, which of course is an offer that has not been accepted. Clearly, that's why we're here. So what is the offer that you would accept?
Teachers have talked about the fact that they need to, and you've heard me say this already before, so forgive me for repeating myself. They want to make up for lost inflation and keep pace with current inflation. The exact number that teachers are looking for, I'll leave that to negotiating at the table, because that's where that conversation should be had, not within the media talking about specific numbers, because that just creates a bunch of speculation and around that topic. And so I would leave that to our negotiators. Teachers have expressed to our negotiation team where we are in terms of what they're looking to see with that, and they have rejected the fact that government has put the offer on the table that they have.
Okay, so we're not getting the numbers, okay. One more clarifying question though before we end. Could that 72-hour notice that you've talked about, you're saying it's not happening now, okay, but could that potentially happen on Sunday or Monday, just as this long weekend is about to be wrapped up? I understand that could be a possibility. Is that something you're saying could happen?
Like I said, Provincial Executive Council, which is the governing body of the association, will make that determination about when and if we need to put in place the 72-hour notice. Whether that happens this weekend, I wouldn't pre-assume what Provincial Executive Council would do, because they need to talk to their members just like we do, and that decision will be made at the time when we need to make it.
Okay, thank you.
Lisa has a question.
Yes, I was gonna say, I'm just gonna go to the remaining question online. We just have one more remaining question, and then
All right.
we'll return back to the room here. Lawrence, Radio Canada, go ahead and unmute yourself, please.
Thank you. I just have one question. Can you clarify what happened last night? Like, who walked away from the table saying we won't budge on this?
I mean, the negotiations this week, as we were having discussions, it was clear to us that government was not willing to move beyond their tight fiscal area that they were in. And so recognizing that we were sort of at an impasse, the association chose to end conversations for that day.
Thank you. That was it for me.
Okay, thank you. Lisa.
Yeah, sorry, just one more question. Do you think it was inappropriate for the minister to put out that press release yesterday and speak this morning about the details of the negotiation? Was that bargaining in public, bargaining in bad faith?
It was not necessarily bargaining in what he was relaying in terms of it's not bargaining information. Do I agree with everything that the minister said? Absolutely not. And would I challenge him on a variety of things that he said in the press release yesterday and today? Absolutely. But the specifics about how do we get to a final agreement between ourselves and the government is something that we shouldn't be talking about publicly.
Up until yesterday, how was negotiations going? Was it going well? Was it constructive? Was it how was negotiations going until we got here?
Well, I mean, if you're having a conversation and still negotiating, that's always going well, right? It's always good to be at the table. There is a certain element of frustration, I would recognize that, which probably on both sides, of not being able to move towards the things that you would want the other side to move on. Teachers have been very clear about their expectations and their needs, and the levels of frustration increased through the course of the day.
Okay, I don't think we have any more questions. I think we're gonna go ahead and wrap it up.
All right, well, just want to thank everybody for being here today and for your interest in our ongoing negotiations and public interest in our public education in Alberta. So thank you for being here.
I think we might have one more question.
Okay, this is.
They requested it, but we need to know what
We don't know who it is?
outlet they're with. They're just as an iPhone.
Okay, there was a question in the Zoom chat. We don't know who it was from. Were you going to go ahead and unmute yourself? We didn't see a question in the chat itself.
Oh, hi, hey, it's Colleen Underwood. Can you hear me?
Colleen Underwood from CBC?
Yeah, hey,
Yep.
how are you?
I'm well, thank you, Colleen.
Awesome. Sorry, I know this has been sort of talked about a lot, but I'm just trying to get a sense of, like, how far apart is this salary discussion? Because from my non-expertise eyes, the province says we're offering 12% over 4 years with adjustments, it's 17% for most teachers, and you sound like you want 12% over 4 years with adjustments with the grid and stuff I don't understand. So, but are you guys close, or the numbers that you guys are talking are different? Do you don't mind?
No, in terms of conversations around salary, there is a lot of light between us, but that light could be easily achieved. So I think that we're relatively close, but we still need to have some serious discussions about where we end up at the end of that.
Wonderful. That's all I really wanted to know.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. I think
I think we're done then. Thank you everybody for being here, and thank you for those who have joined us online.
Sorry, Jason. I just wanted to mention that we will be sending out a news release after this shortly. If you have any questions, you can go ahead and contact myself, Heather Grant, and I'll be happy to help you out. Thank you.